Welcome back everybody, my name's Nick930 and this is my final review for the recently released Death Stranding. Death Stranding is an open-world action-adventure game, developed by the creator of the Metal Gear Solid series, Hideo Kojima, and his new team at Kojima Productions. In it, players will need to travel across a vast open-world environment, delivering packages using a wide variety of tools, vehicles, and equipment, whilst avoiding dangerous post-apocalyptic elements like deadly rain, bandits, and shadowy creatures called BTs. The game is about as strange as all the early trailers would suggest, and despite its seemingly repetitive core concepts and questionable design decisions, the experience is rewarding enough that I felt engaged all throughout. So to help break it all down, let's first start by taking a spoiler-free look at the story. Death Stranding takes place in the United States, after a mysterious event called the Death Stranding releases deadly creatures called BTs across the country, triggering apocalyptic conditions. The BTs are these shadowy, ghost-like creatures that sit between the realm of the living and the dead, and their presence triggers a deadly rain called Timefall that rapidly ages anything it touches. If a human is killed for whatever reason and is then consumed by the BTs, an extraordinary event called a void out will occur, triggering a massive explosion capable of leveling entire cities. In response to all of this, the United States are broken down into several distinct walled-off cities called knots, and rely solely on a company called Bridges to keep them all connected with package deliveries and communication. Since the couriers employed by Bridges are stuck out in no man's land, they are equipped with a special technology involving premature babies and artificial fetuses called bridge babies, or BBs for short, that allow them to detect the presence of BTs. Players assume the role of Sam Porter, a courier who is tasked with reconnecting all the knots in America, while dodging BTs, bandits, and terrorists along the way. A bulk of the game's narrative centers around Sam and his adopted BB-28, as they meet with clients and run back and forth across vast open valleys. But in classic Kojima fashion, there are plenty of lengthy cutscenes that help to piece the story together. Kojima demonstrates an expert level of quality when it comes to his storytelling capabilities, with some beautiful music choices, great motion and voice capture performances, along with a highly unique plot. Though it's not perfect, with some plot elements being insultingly predictable, and a lot of concepts being over-explained. Still, it's easily one of the most unique and interesting story experiences to come out of the gaming industry in the past few years. The gameplay, on the other hand, can be a bit more divisive. Death Stranding takes the infamous fetch quest mission design from the open world genre and uses it as the core gameplay concept. Most missions in the game require you to pick up a package from one location and deliver it across a vast empty world. It's an incredibly mundane idea to base your entire game on, but it's much more involved than it seems. These large empty environments are actually populated with a number of clever obstacles, like large fields of rocks that make it difficult to traverse by vehicle, wide rivers with variable depths posing a risk to you and your cargo, and groups of enemies that will need to be carefully bypassed to save time and safely deliver your packages. While these obstacles aren't too difficult to overcome on their own, and can often be bypassed by finding an alternate route, the combination of several different obstacles along with unique delivery parameters help to keep things fresh. Some deliveries, for example, will require you to stack up a comically high pile of packages on your back, requiring you to constantly shift your weight and avoid sharp turns. Some deliveries are more fragile and will need to be delivered across large chasms and across bumpy terrain, and others are timed, requiring expert terrain knowledge to be as efficient as possible. The game will start off with some straightforward deliveries that need to be made on foot, and gradually introduces more gameplay mechanics, like how to distribute weight properly, maintain stability, and utilize vehicles. But as you continue to expand the chiral network, the game really starts to pick up, with much more variable terrain and a ton of new equipment and structures to help contend with it all. Successfully delivering packages and connecting distribution centers to the network will reward players with XP towards their courier rank, that will in turn unlock new equipment to fabricate using acquired resources. Equipment include ladders that can be used to climb up terrain or cross dangerous rivers, ropes to rappel down cliffs, and spray cans to repair damaged cargo. Eventually, players will be able to unlock access to vehicles, which change up the experience completely, allowing players to store a ton more cargo and greatly speed up delivery time. Players can also create structures using special fabrication kits and resources, something that becomes a necessity in order to traverse the harsher terrain. Even more interesting is that abandoned structures, vehicles, and equipment can be discovered by other players in their own instance of the game, assuming that you're connected to the internet. This makes for a drastically different experience every time you boot up the game, as players remotely assist in expanding the world with storage containers, safe houses, and even long paved roads, giving the illusion that America is slowly being rebuilt from the ground up. Players can even leave notes behind, similar to the Dark Souls games, making the long trip across the country feel a bit less lonely than it really is. Some of the most intense moments in the game are encounters with the deadly BT enemies, that are always preceded by a brief cutscene of the BT detecting antenna springing to life, as BB-28 begins to point out their locations. These phantom creatures are mostly invisible, and will only reveal themselves when the player is standing completely still, and can be seen slowly drifting through the air. Getting too close to a BT will either cause a tar pit to immediately form under the player, requiring them to mash the square button and move out of the way, or will automatically trigger a mini-boss encounter with one of a few different boss-type BTs, that appear as a weird hybrid of creatures like whales, squids, or lions. These creatures are pretty easy to defeat, as the battle zones often randomly drop extra grenades and health to make it easier. But the amount of time it takes and potential damage to cargo greatly encourages the more stealthy approach when possible. Something that feels a bit awkward thanks to the ridiculous detection range of human enemies and the lack of solid cover or even a way to go prone. Death Stranding will take a good chunk of time to complete, as each delivery can take anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes, depending on the distance of course. And there's plenty of unique combat encounters with BT enemies and strange flashbacks to help mix up the gameplay loop. But still, at the end of the day, the game is all about getting from point A to point B, and while the upgrades to improve your efficiency can make the experience gradually more interesting, the slow pacing is likely not for everyone. I personally found myself enjoying the gameplay, more than I thought I would, but that doesn't mean Death Stranding is without its faults. Movement feels noticeably clunky and unresponsive at times. The map and UI is needlessly confusing and inefficient, and the game's combat and stealth mechanics are disappointingly shallow, especially considering that they're coming from the creator of one of the most iconic stealth action franchises in the industry. But some of the most frustrating design choices in the game are the repetitive cutscenes and lengthy animations. I have no problem with the high quality cutscenes that help to expand on the game's narrative, even the incredibly long ones. But having the exact same drawn out cutscene of Sam going down an elevator, laying down in bed, waking up, taking a shower, walking away from the shower, sitting down, all of which need to be skipped separately for some reason, just seems excessive. And then there's dialogue sequences on the codec or with holograms that can't be skipped at all, but can instead be muted, which seems like a completely useless feature. What's worse is that these dialogue sequences often are reiterating the same information that's already been conveyed several times before. Speaking of which, Death Stranding displays tooltips on the screen pretty much 90% of the time, even if you've already seen the tooltip before. I looked everywhere through the menus to disable these, but there doesn't seem to be any available option. Still, most of these are pretty minor complaints, and hopefully we'll see some of these things get addressed in future patches. Next, let's talk about the presentation. Death Stranding is built using a modified version of Guerrilla Games' Decima engine, and thanks to efforts by Kojima Productions, looks absolutely incredible. Character models look insanely lifelike, especially the lead character portrayed by Norman Reedus. Lighting, while not dynamic, does still look very impressive, and helps to set up Death Stranding's unique setting and tone, while effects like water simulation and fluid physics for things like the tar during the large BT battles look fantastic. The game does run at a locked 30 FPS, but is very stable, with no stuttering, crashing, and very few network-related issues. And aside from the questionable design choices I mentioned earlier, the bulk of the game experience feels very polished. Overall, Death Stranding is definitely one of the most unique titles to come out of the industry this year. The game's story, while a bit shallow on the surface, offers a ton of unique concepts and ideas that will likely be analyzed and interpreted in interesting ways for many years to come. The gameplay, while seemingly mundane and boring, is surprisingly addicting and rewarding, but will understandably not be for everyone. And the game's visuals and overall presentation help to push the boundaries of what's possible on the current generation hardware, and I look forward to seeing what Kojima and his team have planned next. But what do you guys think? Did Death Stranding meet your expectations? Let me know in the comment section. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos posted every week.